The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be with you, Tom. You know that.
Yay, Tom! I love it in Flint!
You're very astute, Tom.
Not an easy question.
I'll debate Andy Dillon on your show.
Well, that's a very good question. Hello, darling. This is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, with Tom Sumner.
I'm all right, Tom. How are you? You lucky day, Mr. Sumner.
Ciao, Tom. How are you today?
That's a good question.
Hi, this is actor, comedian Joe Napodi, and you're listening to the Tom Smothers. I'm sorry, what's his name? Oh, Sumner. The Tom Sumner Program.
Good morning, Tom. How you doing?
Hey, at least I got the Tom part right.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
$10 million in the crosshairs of Hurricane Florence. I'm Sean Cantwell. Hurricane Florence put a corridor of more than 10 million people in the crosshairs Wednesday as the monster storm closed in on the Carolinas. Uncertainty over its projected path spreading worry across a widening swath of the southeast. Faced with new forecasts that showed a more southerly threat, Georgia's governor joined his counterparts in Virginia and North and South Carolina in declaring a state of emergency, and some residents who thought they were safely out of range boarded up their homes. The National Hurricane Center's best guess was that Florence would blow ashore as early as Friday afternoon around the North Carolina-South Carolina line, then push its rainy way westward with the potential for catastrophic inland flooding. Florence's winds in the afternoon were down to 120 miles an hour from a high of 140 miles an hour, and the Category 4 storm fell to a Category 3, with a further slow weakening expected as the storm nears the coast. But authorities warned it will still be an extremely dangerous hurricane. Tropical storm force winds extended 195 miles from Florence's center, and hurricane force winds reached out 70 miles. The National Weather Service said 5.25 million people live in areas under hurricane warnings or watches, and 4.9 million live in places covered by tropical storm warnings and watches. The Hurricane Center said Florence will approach the coast Friday and linger for a while before rolling ashore. Meanwhile, Congress is moving to avert a legislative disaster that could lead to a partial government shutdown just weeks before the November midterm elections. Senators approved a $147 billion package Wednesday night to fund the Energy Department, veterans programs, and the legislative branch. The bill is the first of three spending packages Congress hopes to approve this month to avoid a government shutdown when the new budget year begins October 1st. The measure, which represents a compromise between House and Senate negotiators, was approved 92-5. The House is set to vote on the package on Thursday. If all three compromise spending packages are approved by both chambers and signed by President Trump, they would account for nearly 90% of annual spending, including the military and most civilian agencies. The U.S. may have reclaimed the title of the world's biggest oil producer sooner than expected. The U.S. Energy Information Administration said Wednesday that America likely surpassed Russia in June and August after jumping over Saudi Arabia earlier this year. The agency says that conclusion is based on preliminary estimates. If those estimates are right, it would mark the first time since 1973 that the U.S. has led the world in output, according to government figures. In local news, a medical examiner believes 2-month-old Elijah Frierson died of a skull fracture caused by blunt force trauma, meaning hits to his head. His mother, 28-year-old Khalees Clemens, was arrested Tuesday and charged with his murder 6 months to the day after he was found dead on March 11th. She appeared before a judge for arraignment Wednesday. Police responded to the family's residence in Buena Vista Township March 11th after Clemens found her son unresponsive and not breathing. She claimed to have fallen asleep with him and found him dead when she awoke. Police launched an investigation after noticing some suspicious injuries on Frierson. That led to Clemens facing a charge of open murder. A 26-year-old man was shot and killed in broad daylight on Saginaw's west side Wednesday afternoon. He was shot around 1 p.m. in front of 713 North Mason Street between Throop and Hayes Streets, a few blocks from Covenant Healthcare Hospital. An ambulance took him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. His identity was not released while authorities worked to contact his family. Police did not immediately say whether anyone was arrested. The case is Saginaw's 13th homicide of 2018. Authorities say a 16-year-old girl has died after being stabbed by another teenage girl during a fight inside a high school classroom in Warren. Police Commissioner Bill Dwyer said the girl was stabbed twice in the chest Wednesday morning at Fitzgerald High School and was pronounced dead about an hour later. Police say the 16-year-old victim and the 17-year-old suspect had both dated the same boy. The school was initially placed on lockdown, but students have since been released. In sports, the Houston Astros swept the series at Comerica Park for the first time, wrapping up a 3-game set with a 5-4 victory over the Tigers on Wednesday. If you're planning to escape from a burglary via bike, downing a case of beer and a bottle of Jaeger beforehand will likely make it difficult. That story in the forecast in 60 seconds.
Support for the Tom Sumner Program comes from Hamity Complete Food Center. The same family values and community spirit that founded Hamity's back in 1911 and sent trucks of food to sit-down strikers in 1937 is back, Hamity sacks and all. Hamity Complete Food Center is located at 2629 West Pearson Road near Clio Road in Flint and on Facebook.
Since April of 2008, Tom Sumner has produced a daily talk show promoting civilized conversation about politics, public affairs, pop culture, and the arts. From intelligent interviews, forums, and armchair politics, to live musical performances and previews of Flint Symphony Orchestra concerts.
Hello, I'm Maestro Enrique Di Meg wishing Tom a happy 10th anniversary. Congratulations on your success, my friend.
The Tom Sumner Program, old-fashioned radio for a new generation. 10 years and more to come.
A burglar downed 24 bottles of beer and a bottle of Jägermeister before he tried to escape from police on a bicycle. Jai Kennedy, who had also taken cocaine, was chased by police for a mile as he made a number of U-turns to shake them off. The 24-year-old eventually crashed into a police car and fell off, ending the chase in Birmingham, England. When quizzed by police, Kennedy said he'd been recently released from prison and was bored. Mostly cloudy today with a high of 79 and a low of 63. That's the latest. I'm Sean Cantwell.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
This is Mayor Weaver, and you're listening to the Tom Sumner Program.
Stream us live weekdays from 9 a.m. to noon at TomSumnerProgram.com, made possible by listeners like you.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
And welcome back, everybody, as we roll into the second hour of our 3-hour tour here on the Tom Sumner Program. My guest joining me by phone is the author of a book. It's been out for a while, but it's out in paperback now. It's the New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, The Underground River. My guest is Martha Conway. Martha, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Martha, this is... well, I guess the best way to refer to this genre-wise is historical fiction. What makes it historical and what makes it fiction?
Well, it is not, it's not based in the present time. It takes place in 1838. And there's one true fact that starts the whole thing off, which was the sinking of the steamboat Moselle. That happened on the Ohio River, and it was sort of like the Titanic of the day. It was sudden. People were not able to get off of it, and out of about 300 passengers, only about 100 or less survived. So that's the true part. Everything else is fiction. Everything else from there, the story, the characters, I made up.
And this revolves around the issue of slavery. The Underground Railroad plays a part in this story. What was it about that particular time period that attracted you to tell a story about that time period?
Mm-hmm. Well, I grew up in Ohio, and the Ohio River pre-Civil War was the natural barrier between the North and the South, and it was used for slaves running away from slavery. They would cross the Ohio River into freedom. So that was a very potent symbol. It's not only a symbol, but a real place in my mind. And I started off with this idea of a character. I had a neighbor of mine said to me about her son, well, my son can't lie. And I knew her son, and I thought, yeah, I can see that. He goes to great pains to tell the truth whenever possible. And wouldn't that be a great trait for a character, somebody who couldn't lie? And I started thinking of all the types of trouble that such a person might get into because they couldn't tell those little white lies that everybody tells. And then thinking of the Ohio River, I thought, what if they were compelled not only to lie, but to break the law? And that's when the idea of the Underground River and helping fugitive slaves came into the story.
And there's readers have picked up on the main character having being on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, the original vision that I had for my character, May Bedlow, the woman who can't lie, definitely is someone who's on the spectrum. Of course, in 1838, there were no terms like autism or on the spectrum or Asperger's, so I had to be a little careful on how I described her. But she's somebody who, misses social cues a little bit and sort of just has to make her own way in the world. So that was an interesting challenge. I also have a sister who's on the spectrum, so I drew on my experience there, and I think that May became a very for me, she became a very, very real character.
With people in that time period in 1838 that had those traits or exhibited those traits, when you were researching for this book, did you explore how that might have been explained, how that might have been described?
I did a little bit, yeah. I was looking at the sort of words that people used to describe people who were just, as I said, couldn't quite pick up on social cues, were a little bit awkward, socially awkward or quirky. Those were the words that I kept coming up with when I was doing my research.
Yeah. How was the research for this book different than research you've done for other books?
Well, for one thing, I was able to go to the Ohio River a few times. Of course, it's changed a lot. I now live in California, so when I went back to the Ohio River, when I went back to Ohio, it really had changed, and I had to use my imagination in terms of setting a lot more than I would have maybe for some other places. And for one thing, all the little towns that I described are pretty well gone, and the river itself is much more tame. It's been manicured, and it doesn't rise and fall quite as much as it used to. But I did do quite a few trips back, and I even rode a steamboat with my son on the river, and that was fun. We were able to see the exact spot where the Moselle went down, which was it looks like nothing now, but it was fun for me.
I want to stay on this inability to lie thing for just a moment, because an important part of this story is the fact that you have a character who has this difficulty with lying, who's brutally honest, but then finds themselves in a position where they have to keep secrets.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I really wanted to explore when I was writing the novel was how a person would change, not just showing the injustice of slavery and telling slave stories, but actually showing how a person who might not take a stand because of who they are, their inability to lie, in the case of May Bedlow, but how she actually is able to go about changing, which to me is a really interesting process, and one of the things that I realized, what happens is May gets a job on a riverboat theater, and she starts to become more involved in this theater and play acting, and the director of the riverboat, who becomes a love interest, sort of coaches her on this idea of plays and watching other people. And I really do believe that theater and novels and movies and all sorts of storytelling helps us to develop empathy. And when we develop empathy, because we're were engaged in how somebody else might live. That's I think how personal change really happens. So when May is able to really develop empathy, I think that's when she's able to overcome this not overcome the condition, but she works with her condition to do the right thing, to lie and to break the law.
Martha, I want to talk a little bit about activism then and activism now, and that how one makes that decision and makes that change, that transformation. But we have a break right here. Can you stick around and we'll talk some more?
Sure. Yep.
Excellent. We're going to take a short break, let our broadcast partners at 92.1 FM squeeze a few words in edgewise. We're going to be, if you're streaming the program at TomSumnerProgram.com, we have some messages as well. And then we'll continue my conversation with author Martha Conway about her book, The Underground River. Don't touch that dial. Don't click that mouse.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
Crime Stoppers is offering up to $2,500 for information that helps lead to the felony arrest of the person responsible for killing Sidney Pettigrew. On Tuesday, May 1st, 2018, 51-year-old Sidney Pettigrew was shot and killed while working out at the Rock Fitness Center in the 2500 block of South Saginaw Street on Flint South Side. Submit information anonymously at p3tips.com or by calling 1-800-422-JAIL. Remember, your voice matters.
Imagine a journey down a picturesque riverway. Imagine your Flint River, 142 miles of recreation, natural beauty, and precious resources. The Flint River is a vital resource that is available for all to use and enjoy. The river and its ecosystem provide unlimited recreational opportunities and natural beauty while supporting wildlife in a vibrant landscape. We all have a responsibility to protect and preserve this precious resource. Learn more at flintriver.org or call the Flint River Watershed Coalition at 810-767-6490.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
East Village Magazine is the monthly neighborhood magazine read all over Flint. With support from grants, donations, and advertisers, East Village Magazine's talented local writers give you an in-depth look at local news, issues, and people that make Flint, Flint. Copies of East Village Magazine are available at many of your favorite shops and restaurants around Flint or online at eastvillagemagazine.org. East Village Magazine, community-focused and community-supported.
Attention men under the age of 35. You know what really impresses the ladies? When a guy has a few drinks and later gets pulled over for buzzed driving. That could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. There goes let's grab dinner and a movie. Oh, I know. You drive more carefully when you're buzzed. You've proven that hundreds of times. A woman admires that kind of confidence. And you've practiced how to speak if a cop does pull you over. Slowly, clearly, and politely like, "Good evening, officer." A woman admires that kind of foresight. And what woman doesn't find it adorable that you call it buzzed even though the law calls it drunk? You could kiss $10,000 goodbye, along with any chance of having a girlfriend. Because nothing says I'm a catch more than a guy who lives in his parents' basement and calls it my place.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Support for the Tom Sumner Program comes from Hamady Complete Food Center. The same family values and community spirit that founded Hamady's back in 1911 and sent trucks of food to sit-down strikers in 1937 is back, Hamady sacks and all. Hamady Complete Food Center is located at 2629 West Pearson Road near Clio Road in Flint and on Facebook.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow, and I'm listening to the Tom Sumner Show.
Stream us live weekdays at 9 Eastern at TomSumnerProgram.com. Made possible by listeners like you.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm talking with author Martha Conway about her book, The Underground River. Welcome back, Martha.
Hi, thank you.
I mentioned I wanted to talk about this transition from the bystander to activism, for lack of a better phrase. But in the book, it really starts with this sinking of the Moselle and the impact that surviving that has on the main character, May Bedloe. At least it sort of seems that way. Is that disaster, that sinking of the boat and her surviving it, key to the empathy she develops to become anti-slavery?
Well, I think that it's the launch pad for that process, because she, previous to that, she's always been traveling with her cousin, and her cousin sort of takes care of her. And her cousin Comfort is an actress who's sort of down on her luck, and she and May get wrenched apart during this sinking of the Moselle. And from that point on, May really has to, look out on her own, be out on her own, and be independent in a way that she's never had to before in her life. So, yes, I think that it is the marking point for her going from being a sheltered person who doesn't have to really think too much about making her way herself to being somebody who, has to lean on her own wits in order to get her bread and butter. And besides all that, the sinking lands them right smack in the middle of the conflict between the North and the South. This is before the Civil War, but already the anti-slave people and the pro-slavery people are head-to-head, North and South on the Ohio River. So it really brings her right into the battleground.
And the transition she goes through, this is more than a decade before the Civil War actually breaks out.
Yes, and people were fired up about it for many decades. In fact, when I was doing my research, I was amazed not that even at that early date, people were fired up around the issue of slavery, but that it took so long for the issue to really come to a head, because people really were, just sort of like today. They had their stand and they dug their feet into it, and it was not a time of compromise or really listening to each other. It was very incendiary.
Well, but people wouldn't have interacted in those days the way they do now.
That's true.
Was the
no Facebook, no Twitter.
Yeah, was the floating theater a communication device?
It was, in a way, yeah. I mean, people would get their information from posters that were hung up on tree trunks and newspapers, of course. But if you didn't like the newspaper, there might be gangs of people who would burn down newspaper buildings if they didn't like what newspapers were printing. The floating theater, definitely going down the Ohio River, was one source of information, and it was entertainment for people who really did not have much in the way of entertainment. And when I was researching real floating theaters, I found that the crowds were always large. People would do anything that they could to get this little bit of entertainment. They would pay with food. They would pay with bartering. They would bring pies. They would bring ham if they didn't have a dime to pay for their ticket. But yeah, to your point, they would definitely find out news of the wider world through these passing boats.
Hey, I would think, especially for people who didn't read.
Right. Yeah. It would have to be all word of mouth.
And so there wouldn't have been the exchange of confrontational conversation that we have today. Does that make it different, the process of becoming sort of politically aware and taking a stand on an issue? Does it make it drastically different for then than now, or are they similar in how?
Well, I think that they're similar in that sometimes people then and now both will make very strong decisions based on very little evidence, and they will speak with their heart more than maybe learning facts. For instance, there were all sorts of rumors about slavery in the North. For instance, people would say to each other, "Well, slavery wasn't so bad in the South. They really treat them very well, and they get they get food and clothing and shelter and work, and it's much better down there than it is even up here." They would tell themselves these rumors, having never seen slavery up close. Another rumor that circulated in the North was that the abolitionist movement was a movement that was created by England to try to break the United States government. So there were all these rumors of, and people sometimes didn't know what to believe. So one of the things I think that was important for my character May Bedlow was that she actually, when they were traveling down the river, they would go to the towns in the north and they would go to the towns in the south. So when they went to the towns in the south, she actually got to see slavery up close and what was going on.
Well, and I would think that the Underground Railroad would have been a conduit for information as well, with the people coming up from the south with stories to tell. Yeah, probably, although they were running, they were trying to get as far away as possible, and there was a huge cloak of secrecy. One railroad stop, as they were called, didn't know where the next one was. They didn't know each other, or maybe they only knew the one behind them or the one in front, but that was it. So there was a real cloud of secrecy around that. There had to be, for safety's sake. And it would, how unusual would it have been for people like May Bedlow to actually come in contact with runaway slaves?
I don't think it would not have been very common common, to be honest, because it was done so in such secret. And she was in the position where she knew an abolitionist who called in a favor. So because she had this personal connection, a woman who wanted May's help, that's how she sort of got tapped. But she would not, I don't think a person back then would have stumbled into this situation. You would have to know somebody.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. This would not have been the normal course or something that would happen accidentally.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, because it was too dangerous to let too much information sort of out in the public.
And the public wouldn't have really necessarily been looking for that kind of information.
No, right, exactly.
Is the idea of writing historical fiction, is that something you've done before in previous books, or is this a first time at it, and do you have the bug now?
I definitely have the bug. Yeah, I definitely have the bug. My first novel was actually a mystery, and it took place in present day San Francisco, which is where I live. And then after that, I wrote another mystery, but it was set in the past. It was set in 1920 Chicago. And I found that I just love doing the research. I love doing history. I love reading firsthand accounts of the way people lived. That's really what I'm interested in, is the way people lived, more than maybe the politics of the moment. Even though politics always seems to, it is the world we live in, so there's always that in my novel somewhere. After I wrote that historical mystery, I've now written two more just sort of straight historical fiction. The first, Thieving Forest, also takes place in Ohio, and even though it takes place in northern Ohio near Toledo, around 1806, I sort of think of that and the Underground River and the book that I'm working on now, which also takes place in Ohio, as my sort of Ohio trilogy. And in it, I didn't set out doing this, but looking back, it seems that this is what I've done. I've touched on three sort of important parts of the 19th century. The first was the pioneer movement, and then the second in the Underground River is the abolitionists and the slavery pre-Civil War. And then the third, the novel I'm working on now, takes place in Ohio, and it's just after the Civil War. So, yeah, I love doing historical fiction. I can't imagine doing anything else at the moment, but you never know.
Well, now something tells me that that this one that you're working on, that takes place in 1806 in northern Ohio near Toledo, has something to do with the and I could be completely off on the dates, but the that border war between Ohio and Michigan.
Yeah, the Toledo War. It doesn't actually touch on that, but it's funny you should bring that up, because as soon as I started working on that, my dad sent me a book on that war, which is really interesting. But my book is about this is the book that has already been published, Thieving Forest. That is more about the various communities that lived in Ohio at that time, and it takes place in the Great Black Swamp, which is pretty much drained now, but it used to be almost as large as Connecticut, and people really could not get through it very easily. And it's a quest novel. It's a woman looking for her lost sisters. So although I wanted to bring in the Toledo War because it's so interesting and strange, it wasn't quite, it didn't quite mesh very well with the quest story I was working on.
Now that first book that you did, that was a mystery that took place in San Francisco, and was fairly contemporary.
Yeah,
that won an Edgar Award.
It was nominated for an Edgar Award. Yeah,
Oh, I thought
it didn't win, but it was nominated.
Oh darn! Well, they say it's just as good to be nominated. I don't know how true that is, Martha, but they say that.
Yeah, it was no, definitely it was very, very nice, and the person who won actually, very nice woman, great book, was a historical mystery, and I think reading that made me want to write a historical mystery myself.
I'm fascinated by history novels because I am such a fan of history. And it is addicting a little bit because there are so many untold stories from history that adding new stories. I guess I'm doing this backwards. There are so many stories that are told from history that it's nice to have new stories set in those same times where we can explore that time period through new stories and adventures. How did you get started writing?
Gosh, I was scribbling ever since I was a little kid, and I was actually involved in plays a lot and theater when I was in high school, but I always wanted to be writing. And I started taking classes in college and after college, and I ended up going to a writing program at San Francisco State where I met the man who would become my husband. So that was one good thing. And now I am teaching myself for Stanford's continuing studies program. And I always tell people who are just starting out that taking a class is great for a lot of reasons, but one reason is that I think it's difficult to get yourself into the habit of writing and bring writing into your daily life. So one thing a class does is give you deadlines and make you figure out a way how to carve your life in such a way that you can write. You can find the time to write, whether you have a job, a full-time job, a part-time job, kids, whatever else you have in terms of commitment, you need to find some time in which to devote to writing. And it's a joy. I love writing. I love sitting down at my computer. I love working out sentences. It's also very frustrating when the story seems to be going off in a direction you didn't expect. But it's sort of like working a crossword puzzle. It's actually, I think, more like creating a crossword puzzle and solving it at the same time.
Are you a very disciplined writer? Do you sit down and you set a certain time, an agenda, and you sit down and write? And can you be productive that way, or do you binge write? What is the process like for you?
Yeah, I'm much more. I'm much more habitual. I need to have a set time, especially when my kids were little. It was very easy for the outside world to sort of encroach and feel like, oh, I should do this, I should do that. So quite early on, I made a routine for myself whereby I would sit down in the morning after I got my kids to school, and I would write for 2 or 3 hours. For me, that works a lot better than binge writing, even though I can see the appeal of really getting into that, just hunkering down and having a whole day where all you're thinking about is your story. That seems very attractive to me, but it's not anything that I could ever really regularly incorporate into my life. So I do it the other way. I do it the habitual way, and that seems to work for me.
Well, this book, The Underground River by Martha Conway, the New York Times Book Review said this: Twain had his life on the Mississippi. Conway's life on the Ohio makes you see the place through May's eyes in all its muddy glory. How does it feel to be compared to Twain?
Oh, fantastic. It's great. Yeah, he's quite the wordsmith.
Are there are there similarities between basically in groups of people who live along riversides and riverbeds?
Well, I think that the kind of life that that people live on the river is definitely makes a bond out of it. And one of the things that I found when I was reading a lot about people who lived back in 1838 was north or south of the river, they were really very similar. And even though there was this heated argument over slavery, many of these people, if you go down to the Ohio River and you're either in Ohio on the north or Kentucky on the south, the people there they have the same accent. You know, they have the same kind of lifestyle. So it was interesting to me how similar the people were, really.
Martha, we're getting close to the end of our time. I can't believe how fast the time is going. The book is The Underground River, an historical novel written by Martha Conway. Martha, I always give guests an opportunity to let listeners know where they can find out more about you, your work, and obviously the books that you've written. Do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. I have a website. It's marthaconway.com, and I have all my books there and a list of my my appearances, my schedules. And I love to hear from readers. People write me, and I always write back, so send me an email at, you can find my address on the website, and I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm also on Goodreads.
All right, Martha. One last question, and I think you've maybe already answered it. But writing is a very solitary process. But you enjoy the aftermath, the interaction with readers.
I do. I love it. I really do, because it's so solitary, as you say. You know, and so often I'm just in the story in my head. So it's lovely to be able to talk to somebody else who's read the story and who has ideas about it. And of course, reading is such a personal process. Everybody has a little bit of a different experience, and I just love to hear about other people's experiences. So yeah, I really enjoy that.
I think that's the theater Martha coming out a little bit.
Could be, yeah.
Martha, thank you so much for spending this time with me this morning.
Thank you, Tom.
I appreciate it.
This has been lovely. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, take care. Bye.
That was author Martha Conway. Her book, The Underground River, the New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, is now in paperback. It's a female-driven antebellum-era novel that has captivated critics, book clubs, and readers across the country. If you're listening to us on 92.1 FM, WFOV in Flint, we're going to let them squeeze a few words in edgewise. If you're streaming us at TomSumnerProgram.com, we have some messages as well, and then we'll be back with more of the Tom Sumner Program right after this. Don't touch that dial. Don't click that mouse.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
East Village Magazine is the monthly neighborhood magazine read all over Flint. With support from grants, donations, and advertisers, East Village Magazine's talented local writers give you an in-depth look at local news, issues, and people that make Flint, Flint. Copies of East Village Magazine are available at many of your favorite shops and restaurants around Flint or online at eastvillagemagazine.org. East Village Magazine, community-focused and community-supported.
Discoveries. They happen when we least expect them, in places we thought we knew. And discoveries have a way of teaching us a little more about ourselves along the way. Welcome to Flint and Genesee County, where up north meets down south. Home to Michigan's largest county park system and a vibrant culture. A place filled with discoveries we've yet to make, throughout acres of beautiful lakes, wetlands, and woods, and in the diverse city beyond. Where the uplifting melodies of gospel choirs fill the air. Where the work of renowned artists color the galleries and museums. Where the fresh fruits and vegetables at the downtown farmers market awaken our senses. And where the cultural center and planetarium broaden our view of the world. Let's spend a few days enjoying the wonders of Flint and Genesee County, where the joy of discovery is pure Michigan. Your trip begins at Michigan.org.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes two. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzzed driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzzed driving, because buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
Technical assistance for the Tom Sumner Program is provided by Swiftlet Technology, engineering and IT services at swiftlet.technology.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
Flint Community Schools encourages area families to enroll today for the 2018-19 school year. Reinforce the importance of a high-quality education to your child by enrolling early at Flint Community Schools. To enroll, visit the administration building at 923 East Kersley Street in Flint, which is open year-round. For more information or answers to common questions, visit flintschools.org or call 810-760-1000. Support for the Tom Sumner Program comes from Hamady Complete Food Center. The same family values and community spirit that founded Hamady's back in 1911 and sent trucks of food to sit-down strikers in 1937 is back, Hamady sacks and all. Hamady Complete Food Center is located at 2629 West Pearson Road near Clio Road in Flint and on Facebook.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.
This is Congressman Dan Kildee, and you're listening to the Tom Sumner Program.
Stream us live weekdays at 9 Eastern at TomSumnerProgram.com. Made possible by listeners like you.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation. Welcome to this presentation of the Comedy Spotlight on the Tom Sumner Program.
Right now, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Newhart.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Many of you may have read The Hidden Persuaders. It's about advertising. And one of the points the book made was that the real danger of the public relations man or the advertising man was that they were creating images. And they felt that in the presidential campaigns, the candidates were really getting closer and closer together. There was no real difference between them. And you were really voting for the man. And this got me to thinking, supposing this science were as far advanced during the Civil War as it is today, and there was no Lincoln. Now, the advertising people, realizing this, would have had to create a Lincoln. And I think they would have gone about it something like this. This is a telephone conversation between Abe and his press agent just before Gettysburg. Hi, Abe, sweetheart, how are you, kid? How's Gettysburg? Sort of a drag, huh? Well, Abe, you know them small Pennsylvania towns. You seen one, you seen them all. Right. Listen, Abe, I got to know it. What's the problem? You're thinking of shaving it off. Abe, don't you see that's part of the image? Right, with the shawl and the stovepipe at the string tie. You don't have the shawl. Where's the shawl, Abe? You left it in Washington. What are you wearing, Abe? A sort of cardigan? Abe, don't you see that doesn't fit with the string tie and the beard? Abe, would you leave the beard on and get the shawl, huh? All right, now what's this about Grant? You're getting a lot of complaints on Grant's drinking, huh? Abe, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't see the problem. I mean, you knew he was a lush when you pointed him. You see what You're gag writers. Yeah, you're gag writers. You want to come back with something funny, huh? Maybe an anecdote about a town drunk. Well, I can't promise anything, Abe. I'll get him working on it. All right, Abe, you got the speech. Abe, you haven't changed the speech, have you? Abe, what do you change the speeches for? A couple minor changes, I'll bet. All right. What are they? You what? You typed it. Abe, how many times have we told you on the backs of envelopes? I understand it's harder to read that way, Abe, but it looks like you wrote it on the train coming down or something like that. Abe, could you do this? Could you memorize it and then put it on the backs of the envelopes? We're getting a lot of play in the press on that. How are the envelopes holding out? You could stand another box. All right, All right. What else, Abe? You changed 4 to 87? I understand it meant the same thing, Abe. Well, Abe, that's meant to be a grabber. Abe, we test marketed that in Erie, and they went out of their minds about it. Well, Abe, it's sort of like Mark Anthony saying, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, I've got something I want to tell you." You see what I mean, Abe? What else? People will little note nor long remember. Abe, what could possibly be wrong with that? They'll remember it. Abe, they'll remember it. It's the old humble bit. You can't say it's a great speech. I think everybody's going to remember it, Abe. You come off a braggart, don't you see that? Hey, Abe, do the speech the way Charlie wrote it, would you? The inaugural address swung, didn't it? All right, anything else? You talked to some newspapermen. Abe, I wish you wouldn't talk to newspapermen. Well, you always put your foot in. No, that's just what I mean, Abe. No. You were a rail splitter, then an attorney. Abe, it doesn't make any sense that way. I mean, you wouldn't give up your law practice to become a rail splitter, don't you? Would you read the biog, Abe? You'll save a lot of trouble on this end. Abe, listen, before I forget, the manufacturer is coming out with the Abe Lincoln T-shirt on Tuesday. Could you work that into the address somewhere, Abe? Play it by ear, whatever you can do. Abe, have you got a pencil and paper there? Would you take this down? You can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time. But you can't fool all the people all the time. Well, you keep doing it differently, Abe. The last quote I got was, you can fool all the people all the time. And you... Abe, hold on. They come up with a thing on Grant. Right. Good. Yeah, all beautiful. Abe, listen to this. They got a beautiful squelch on Grant. Right. The next time they bug you about Grant's drinking, right, you tell them you're going to find out what brand he drinks and send a case of it to all your other generals. Right. No, it's like the brand was the reason he won. No. Abe, use it, it's fun. Trust me on this. Saturday night? Oh, Abe, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be in New York Saturday night. A bridge party at the White House? Oh, Abe, I'd love to make it. How about Seward? You try him? He'll be out of town too, huh? Oh, that's you and what's your name? Be home alone. Mary, be home alone, huh? Listen, Abe, why don't you take in a play? I'll be talking to you. So
This was another comedy spotlight on the Tom Sumner Program.
Crossroad, I fell out on my knee. Went down to the crossroad, I fell down on my knee. I cried, mercy, mercy, nobody saved me. I run. They run. Tell my friend Willie Brown. Hit him out down at the hitching post. Look like I'm sinking down. I got a rider by my side, Brother Donnie Davidson. Going down Rosedale, I got a rider by my side, Brother Tommy Sumner. We'll buy a house for y'all, on the riverside. Oh, bring it down, guys. Crossroad, fall out on my knee. I went down to the crossroad, I fell down on my knee. I cried, mercy, 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 oh, Mother, please save me.
The Whiskey Brothers live at the Hitchin Post. Whiskey Bro Leroy on guitar and vocal, and Don Davidson on bass, yours truly on drums. And just a little way of shifting gears. We're going to go to the news here at the top of the hour, and then we're going to be talking music with Nashville recording artist who hails from Detroit, Paulina Jane, in the next hour of the show. We'll be back.
The Tom Sumner Program. Old-fashioned radio for a new generation.